to the Patio Pondering Podcast. You know, in swine nutrition, we spend a lot of time working towards precision, formulations, models, research, but the pigs don't live in spreadsheets, and the decisions don't get made under perfect conditions. Today I'm joined with Dr. Bob Thaler from South Dakota State University, someone who's spent a career across research, extension, real-world production, both domestically and internationally. Bob and I both earned our PhDs at Kansas State University and share consulting experience. So welcome to the patio, Bob.
Hey, Jim. Thank you very much.
Well, we're going to start off with both guns blazing.
Okay.
Bob, after everything you've seen in swine nutrition, what are we still getting wrong, but we're comfortable with being wrong about it?
Yeah, I guess that is coming out guns blazing. So, I think, one of the things that, and it's starting to get attention, but it should have got attention a long time ago. I mean, it's mortality. That certainly is a big one. The other one that's a concern to me is our culling rate. And what I'll go back to, Jim, so this is probably 15 years ago in graduate seminar. Ashley Gelderman on our master's in swine nutrition was talking about some research papers and said, average U.S. culling rate is 40 to 50%. And Dr. Robbie Pritchard, who is a really well-known beef feedlot nutritionist, went nuts. He goes, how can you have a system that you have 40 to 50% annual turnover and call that acceptable? So I think that's a concern. I think when we have 16% sow mortality, that's not acceptable either. It shouldn't be to us, and I think the people that are always evaluating what we're doing with a negative lens, that should be a concern as well.
Well, Bob, I came up with both guns ablazing, and you came up with the howitzer. You hit on one of the points that I think is really key for our industry. And I use the term that my grandmother used. We're whistling past the graveyard.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
If our detractors like PETA, American Humane Society, really got a hold of that 30% of every pig that's born dies before we eat it,
yep,
that's gold mine for them.
Yep. And that's what I tell our students, it's like, and we in South Dakota, obviously, we have a pretty good beef population. A lot of kids come from ranches and stuff like that. I said, this is not a pig issue, right? This is not a pig issue. We just happen to be the easy target right now. I said, okay, why do you do hot iron brandy? In South Dakota spring hot iron brandy, man, it is almost second to pheasant hunting in our state. But it's part of culture, right? It's that culture. It's the way of
Welcome
life.
Back.
And he said, what about castration without pain management, without pain mitigation? So dehorning, right? I grew up on a cattle farm as well, and how we used to dehorn animals wasn't very pretty, but that's what everybody did. So if whatever management practice you're doing, can you look at a person from an urban area that has no experience in that species and logically explain why you're doing it, right? Why it's better for the animals to do it this way, which looks ugly, versus looking for an alternative. And I said, if you can't do that, then you better start looking for alternatives, because once that gets figured out, you look at what's happened in Colorado, in Oregon. Some of those rules that are passed, and believe it or not, the great state of South Dakota is an urban state. We've got more people living in Sioux Falls and Rapid than other places, and I think we have less than 10 real farmer ranchers in our state legislature. So look at who makes the rules.
Well, and that makes the West River, East River divide look pretty simple compared to the rural-urban divide.
Well, it really does. It really does. And you're exactly right. Yep, there's almost two different countries there, but we're going to have to come together to make this thing work.
Bob, how do we get past talking about it? We've had, 2 or 3 swine survivability conferences in Omaha. Yep. National Pork Board and various land-grant universities have dedicated a lot of money and effort into looking at mortality, but it doesn't seem like we've come up with any solution.
I would respectfully disagree a little bit, because Dr. Eric Weaver here has been doing some really pretty cool stuff on iron, and the stuff that Caitlin McClellan's his PhD student, and it is really so interesting, Jim. You take a look at that. and they've been on a lot of large farms, pulling blood samples, looking at anemia levels, iron levels. And just for an example, so if you look at how long it takes an anemic sow through the farrowing process versus one that's normal, I think a sow with a normal hemoglobin level is done in about 4.5 hours. The ones that are anemic are over 9 hours. And so it's not surprising then the sow that's farrowing for 9 hours is going to have more stillbirths, or she's going to be so tired out she doesn't clean properly, or she just wears out, right? No oxygen to the muscles, muscle fatigue, And so I think some of those things are going to be beneficial, right? All we need is a few of those things to show that we can make improvements. Actually, he's doing some stuff. He and Dr. Rafe Royal, our other extension swine specialists, are also looking at feeding higher levels of soybean meal. And, that seems like heresy in the swine business, right? But the thing is, if you take a look at what our sows are, right? I mean, the new NRC is how many years old? And thank goodness they're updating it, right? But, when that was developed, and I understand that it's a model, I'm not sure we've got the model right for the animals we're working with. Because what Eric's seeing, especially in that last part, well, he did two things. Feeding higher levels of soybean meal and gestational lactation has made a difference. But then secondly, he's added higher levels of minerals, kind of a bump feeding, but in a different way. And that's made some significant differences in pre-weaning death loss. So I think, as some of those things happen, then other smart people say, oh, okay, if they did this with an iron, why don't we look over here? And I think we're going to start seeing some more stuff. But you're right, because, we kicked that can down the road a long time, and we just, kept going past it. But I think we're starting to see some progress, and hopefully that's going to continue.
Bob, do you see that as a disconnect between the people that work in the barns and see those sows when they're in the farrowing house and they notice that she takes a while, and, hey, I came in here and feed at 7, she's not done by the time I feed at 3.
Right.
And the people that can make the decisions from a management and a personnel standpoint?
That certainly could be it. And I don't know if the statistic is still true. I think it probably is, right? A lot of barns are shorthanded. If you're at 80% of the employees that you need, I mean, you may not have time to do the things that you need to do, right? And so I think that could be part of it. But barns that are full staff, it's part of that teaching process, right? We can tell our kids, you go do this, and it may or may not get done. But if we explain to them why it's important, that could make a difference. And again, so if somebody's busting their butt in the barns and doing a really good job, but are running out of time, or if you can help them understand why maybe this task that you're doing isn't as important as making sure you watch these sows farrowing.
And from a production standpoint, some of those parturition issues could be masked with a farrowing house manager that's not afraid to sleeve sows and start pulling pigs.
Right, exactly. And the other thing that's kind of interesting too, so obviously how we got that data on farrowing duration is with cameras, right? So we had cameras, behind and did that. And so now you look at what AI can do. And actually Eric was even talking about that, right? We're having cameras behind sows and behind all sows. And once that process starts, when it comes to that 4-hour mark, it can send a message to somebody saying, look at, this sow's whatever drop dead. I guess that's a bad term, right? Whatever length you say, okay, once the farrowing goes past this long, we've got an issue, somebody needs to address it. And so that might be something too. And I know that sounds a little bit like science fiction, but geez, look at all the other stuff that we're doing that 10 years ago seemed that way. So, I think, the great thing about capitalism, if there's money to be made, people are going to find a way. The same thing with bump feeding and feeding higher levels of vitamins and minerals to a certain phase of animals, right? The poultry people are already doing that, and there's no way in the world poultry people are smarter than pig people. We all know that, right? Plus, we're better looking too. But, so if poultry we need to look at other industries and see what they're doing and what we can adapt. But I think, it was too easy to say, well, we can't run another feed line in there for gestation, right? We can't feed 2 dads, so we're just going to feed them more and call it good. Well, man, if you look at the cost of one feed line and some bulk bends versus death loss or versus, stillborns, or if you're looking lower sow productivity, whatever you want to call that, in a 5 or 10,000 sow barn, that gets pretty expensive pretty quickly.
I think you bring up an issue that we've seen over our career. When we started our undergrads, a big farm was 500 sows.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I worked on one with 250 sows. I had 35 sows of my own. So it was easy to say, hey, these 10 sows are close to Farron House. Let's move them over here. Whereas now, where are those girls in Snake?
Yep.
And you bring that up to somebody who hasn't been in a gestation barn. You don't have a clue what we mean by the snake.
Oh, exactly.
Don't understand the logistics of, okay, today, those next Fairmont sows are in a far southwest corner. Next week, they're going to be in a far northeast corner. So the logistics of that extra feed line becomes insurmountable in a lot of cases if you don't understand.
Yep. But again, hopefully, the payback will be good enough. Somebody, smarter people than me, will get that one figured out.
In a bump feeding, when I was at Hubbard, we had a product called Transrect Sow Ultra that is really taken off in the show pig industry, addressing some of those specific nutrition needs that farrowing sow needs.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of data that we have out there. The logistics of applying it commercially can be tough.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to jump ahead, Bob. One of the controversial opinions I have is where the land grant and the extension system is in the United States.
That's a really good question. And I think a lot of universities suck at it, to be quite honest. The tripartite mission is supposed to be equal, right? Teaching, research, and extension, all of it. And there's an awful lot of land grants out there that research is the number one focus. Teaching and extension are kind of the bastard children, and luckily, at places like South Dakota State, Kansas State, Iowa State, and some of the others, we still value that. At South Dakota State in the animal science department, if you're not a good teacher, you're in trouble. I mean, if you have a teaching appointment, that's pretty important. Same thing on the extension side. You've got to be out there working with producers, working with vets, working with allied industry members. And that's the only reason we ever got our brand new swine unit 10 years ago. Right? That was industry driven because they valued what we were doing, both, from a research standpoint, yes, but the human capital that would come through SDSU. And I would say, there's probably 5 or 6 land grants left that still focus on production swine. There are a lot of people that do research on swine. But if you look at their overall swine program from teaching, research, and extension, it's not there. And so that's a concern of me. And again, great. Yes, we do need to do great research. There's no question about it. But from a selfish standpoint, there's a lot of universities that enrollment is tanking, and there's some smaller colleges and universities that are shutting down just because they don't have enough students. Well, if I'm an 18-year-old student from a farm, you pick wherever, and I do my high school visit, and all they want to do is show me their research labs, they have people that have no clue about animal production, and their livestock units are 60 years old. Why in the world would I want to go there? And again, you're right. Some is about marketing, right? But that's one of the things we've had some great presidents and deans say, look at. We will never say anything bad about another university, but when they come to SDSU, again, I'd say the same thing about Kansas State, Iowa State, and a few others. When they come on campus, we don't have to because they see what we've got. We've got, so 10 years ago, we got a $7.2 million swine unit. This summer, we're going to add 2 more research rooms on $1.6 million, all paid for by the industry, And, but again, new cow-calf unit, first precision ag program in the country, $60 million building there. I mean, you just go on and on and on, right? And so when I talk to kids or other people, the easiest thing for me, Jim, and I'm 66, so I ramble all over the place, right? But when you say, people may call themselves land grants, right? follow the money. Okay. What are you spending your resources on? How do you value teaching faculty? How do you value extension? How do they value? But what about your teaching herds, right? What kind of research are you doing? And again, I have nothing against basic research. It needs to be a blend, right? You use that, we'll use applied research to get going on it, but then you can use that really basic stuff to help understand the mechanism. But where are they spending their money? Is it this new $100 million lab for something else? And what do your livestock facilities look like? And so I think that's a problem with the land grant. But unfortunately, you go back and, the golden age was 1960s, right? Because, every land grant was truly a land grant, right? Animal science departments had animals. We had poultry, we had dairy, we had sheep, you name it, and everybody had those. There's very few universities that have all the species anymore because the state, in the 70s and 80s, state and federal dollars quit. So you got to make a business decision, and we did that in South Dakota in the 80s. We shut down our poultry units because of the way it is. And so that happens. And so you move farther away from that. But I guess you look at what people value and make the decision that way.
I had an interview a few months ago with a man that owns a company that sells especially fertilizer products, and primarily to the sod industry. Okay. And he was lamenting the fact that he couldn't find unbiased research. And I said, if there was just a system, just some system that somebody could come up with where we could have these schools that could work together on this unbiased research, it would be really cool.
Wow, that'd be novel. That'd be so cool.
My view on the land grant system has changed as we mature. I think that we're on the edge of the land grant system being reinvigorated because there's such a push against the biased sponsored research by Monsanto funded it, so it's got to be bad, and put in whatever company. Am I being too optimistic?
I don't know. So when I was at Kansas State, I started there in January of '85. And that's when contract research really started getting going. And again, Jim Nelson did a great job, and Gary Ali were there. Just two legends, right? But that's state. There wasn't enough money, so they started doing contract research. And I still remember I applied for the job at University of Minnesota Morris, and my good friend Lee Johnston got it, and he deserved it because he's better than me. But anyway, I remember the interview process, right? And I talked about doing contract research to help supplement it. And there was one old gentleman in the room that kind of read me the riot act, and it went back to you said, right? You lose your unbiasedness. All of a sudden, you're prostituting yourself to the industry. And and that's why land grants are originally one of the reasons, right? That unbiased research, but the funding hasn't kept us to be there. So I hope there's enough pressure from everybody. But again, there's a lot of land grants that aren't going to go back. I don't believe. Even some of the major agricultural states, administration does not listen to what the ag community tells them. They might do lip service, but they really, smile and walk away.
Smile and wave like the penguins.
Yep, exactly. Hope I'm wrong. I hope it would be great if the land grants did come back because they're such a great institution.
Well, I had a discussion with another K-Stater that's in a university position, and he says that he's too busy that he can no longer train grad students.
Wow.
Because of all the stuff he has to do because of his appointment. And then you add to it the unfilled positions.
Yep.
So somebody has to pick them up. And that's a loss for our industry.
And you hit another point, Jim, that's so important. And, as you take a look at, right, so one of the great things about grad school is, right, you do that research that people want, people need. And nobody's going to argue with that. But the other thing that we do is train the next generation of PhDs, right? And so here's your slippery slope. So if all of a sudden, we start bringing in people that have no clue about production agriculture, a pig's a model that they use, and they're probably doing some really cool stuff, what type of grad students are they going to bring in? Is it going to be the show pig kid from Illinois, or is it going to be the person from Iowa whose family is a fifth generation pork producers? No. First of all, those kids aren't going to be probably interested in that, and they're going to bring people who in. So the people that eventually get PhDs, if you take a look at it, are not the people that are going to work well in a teaching situation and aren't going to work well in an extension situation. I mean, people like to have shared experiences. I mean, you've got to have credibility, unless you got poop on your boots, it's hard to do that. So that's actually a bigger concern of mine is who's replacing me? Who's replacing Lee Johnston? Luckily, K-State got two great young individuals to replace Mike and Bob. Again, another set of legends. But you look, Merlin Lindemann, Phil Miller is going to retire in the near. I mean, Hans Stein is going. I mean, and there's going to be a bunch of us that are retiring, and there's no way we've got enough production-based people with PhDs out there that come back to academia.
Well, to my listeners, I do not share my talking script with any of my guests. They come in green, unbiased, because so in segment number 6, it says next generation.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be a little more blunt than you, Bob. It's my podcast. I can do it.
Yeah,
a few weeks ago, I interviewed Trey Kellner, and I asked him point blank, or said this. I looked at 2 or 3 PhD defenses that were posted, and they were great defenses. But not one of those people could replace Trey Kellner and do what he does at AMBC.
Yep.
And I would contend neither one of those could replace what you and I do working directly with producers.
Yep.
Great scientists.
Right.
They don't know shit about getting mud in their boots and talking to a pig farmer.
Yep.
I don't care if he owns 100,000 sows or 100 sows.
Yep. Exactly.
How do we fix that?
That's going to take some input from the industry, to be quite honest. I mean, in academia we can do a lot, but our administrators will listen to their stakeholders, right? And so, if I was a person giving grants, right, I would, one of the things that you would work in there perhaps is, okay, I want to see the type of student that you're having on this grant. If I'm working with company X and we're looking at this product, I want you to have some kid that is going to go back into production or can teach classes or can do extension. I mean, so here's the other scary thing too, is that, if you look at all the animal science departments across the country, 90% female, 10% male. Even at South Dakota State, we're at 85. And let me be blunt about this. It is nothing against the young females. They're great. They're kicking butt in classes, My concern is where's the young males? And, part of it is the crop farmer thing's been pretty good for quite a few years, And so I think a lot of young people say, I'm just going to stay home because, we're doing really well. And they were. That's changed a little bit. Other thing, at least in South Dakota, we've got a couple of great Votex, wonderful deals, pretty highly on the men's side. And so that's great. I think that's really good too. But somehow we have to figure out how to get those more young men in the animal science thing. But one of my friends and I were talking about this a few years ago. And again, when I was young and when you were young too, right? A lot of farms had multiple species out there, right? And so growing up, I mean, we had beef cattle, we had pigs, we had laying hens, and we had 3 stupid dairy cows that my grandma had to have because she loved milking cows, Grandma turned 75, cows got sold anyway. But anyway, so, you grew up with that. And then good friend Dave Utek, bachelor's and master's in swine nutrition here, runs he's got a really a good-sized swine operation in South Dakota. But his son now works in the medical industry. But part of the deal is, like, if you don't grow up with animal agriculture, why in the world would I go to school to be with pigs? That just seems stupid. I want to be an engineer. So growing up, if you didn't have that, And again, if your parents are part of a 10,000 sow cooperative, you're not in the barn doing chores, right? So I think that's the other thing that's hurt us is we have fewer young people growing up doing chores in some of the species like pigs and poultry.
And I'll throw in another thing. Even if you are a hands-on manager, there's still a language barrier, even though you can speak, let's throw it out there, Spanish. I think that adds to the challenge we have.
It is, and those are tough ones to fix. I think we're going to see more automation come in. I hope. I mean, and you're even seeing it now, right? I mean, mechanical power washers. Why do we have such a high turnover in the swine industry at units, right? There's a lot of really crappy jobs you have to do, and power washing is one of them. And I know a lot of the new barns that Pipestone puts in, they're going to have mechanical or power washers, right? So it doesn't do it perfectly, but it'll get about 80% of it. So all of a sudden, if they can make a bad job a lot easier, that's going to help too. So we just need to look at the jobs that are causing people to leave, and what can we do for automation? What can we do to make that a better situation?
I think we're talking about a legacy of the GI Bill from World War II.
Oh, yeah.
Where we as a society deemed it important that we took care of the veterans for what they did.
Yep.
But that by taking care of them, we told them they need to get off the farm.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we got this whole generation that did wonderful things for our country.
Yep.
And it came down to our generation. It was supplemented with the farm crisis. Like, dude, you ain't coming home.
Yep.
And now,
looking at one of them.
And now it's supplemented because those people that are doing the jobs we're talking about, the pressure washer for Pipestone,
right,
the woman working in the Fairland house outside of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, the person working on the line at Logan Sport at the old IBP plant, their kids aren't going to do those jobs,
right?
Because they're going to be better than us,
right? And that's how every generation is. I mean, your parents, you want a better job for your kids than that, and so we have to help them explain, because again, if you're managing a 5,000 sow unit, you're making some pretty good coin at it, and so, I mean, career choices, and if you like doing those kinds of things, but, I'm being old and cranky, but, we're seeing more and more kids that don't want to work. I mean, or they're too good, you look at the people who pour concrete and do the concrete work. Right, that's tough work, and there's a lot of local people don't want to do that, so we have other people do that. There's plenty of jobs for people to work if they want to work, and unfortunately, we've lost some of our work ethic. I think we focus on some things that really aren't important, and I think oftentimes we, that's a catch-22 thing, Jim. Right, we want to make our life better for our kids than what we had it. But are we making it too easy? Are we not having to do chores? Are we spending more time on the basketball court year round, and doing those things? But yeah, I mean, being on the farm growing up and working those long days and in blizzards or, you'll learn about life that way, and you'll learn about what's important. And I think don't get me wrong, we still have a lot of good kids that have those experiences and have that work ethic, but it's a smaller percentage than what used to be.
Mm-hmm. We have divided agriculture for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. That you're a crop farmer, you're a livestock farmer. I happened to pull open one of the few files I kept from Purdue. It was Aggie Country 10, taught by Dr. Bob Thaler, farm management. It was a fun class because the project was build a farm from scratch so you can understand the capital investment and do budgets and figure stuff out. All of the people that I worked with in my project and we talked to, every single one of them had some sort of livestock diversification. It was cattle, pigs, sheep, but there was some sort of diversification. Now when we're talking about diversification, it's like, oh, maybe you'll grow 20 acres of hemp. Maybe you'll grow 10 acres of pumpkins or something like that. Livestock isn't brought up because it's too hard.
We'll put up some dang solar panels and that, that's a horrible thing.
Well, and I had this revelation when I was helping my son-in-law work cattle. They live out south of Omaha in Cass County, Nebraska.
Yep.
We processed 110 calves, green tagged them, and got them ready. And the facilities sucked.
Yep.
It was held together with baling wire.
Right, yeah.
But the chute was okay. And I thought, how many of these old farmsteads that have a loafing shed with a working system, whether it's crappy or not, have been bulldozed?
Yeah. Yep.
And the fences are gone.
Yep.
So we can't easily go back in a lot of cases, say, hey, Bob, get 100 cows to add to your diversity.
Yeah. And that's even what I tell our students I teach one of the class, Intro to Animal Sciences, like, look at, any farm in the United States today is going to be a multi-million-dollar operation, right? I mean, you buy 500 cows, you've got $1 million invested in that. Unfortunately, facility costs have gotten just nuts. I mean, I'm not, putting up a new wean to finish barn, you've got to have a pretty long contract to make that work. It's not the 5 to 7 years that it's paid off. You're lucky if it's 12 to 15. So it gets harder and harder to do that diversification as well, because just the capital involved there. We used to say, contract finishing was that great step for that son or daughter to come back home, and in the last few years, as construction costs go up, it's made a lot harder. And when in Watertown, South Dakota, they sold day-old calf for $1,600. Now who's going to be able to do that? A young person coming in. So yeah, we're going to be a victim of our own success, I think.
My daughter and son-in-law bought 12 pregnant cows at Dunlap, Iowa, and they paid $3,200 a piece. And when they told me what they paid, I thought, oh, you're crazy. Those same females,
oh yeah,
would probably be $1,000, $1,500 more today.
Yep.
So exactly. How crazy it is that one calf would almost pay for his mother and him.
The one thing I told our beef kids is like, look at, take a look at the corn people, the crop farming, right? Because I still remember, before ethanol came out, corn was $1.80 a bushel, right?
Every day of the week.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And ethanol came and it created a huge demand for corn, which was great. It added value. Those local producers got more for the corn. If they bought into the things, they made a lot of money. But what do farmers, what do ranchers do when they get more money? They buy more land. They run up cash rent, and again, that's the nature of the business, right? When you're profitable, you want to reinvest those assets. And I said, take a look. If you watch in 5 years, what's going to happen to the cost of pastures? What's going to happen to pasture rent? I mean, first of all, we've lost so dang much pasture that under the plow, right? But anyway, so those costs are going to go up. And while the people that are, making all that money in the cow-calf side right now, it's great for them, understanding that their kids and grandkids are looking at a whole new world when land prices, cash rent, if you're renting somebody's pasture, that's going to be a lot more expensive than it ever was.
I didn't intend for us to be old farts sitting on a porch saying, get off my lawn.
Young, yeah.
As you look at our industry, it's highly integrated. What are some opportunities for somebody getting out of South Dakota State that wants to get into pig production but doesn't want to work for an integrated system?
That's a good question. Opportunities, for one thing too. The other thing, Jim, is not every job in the swine industry is in production, right? You look at some of the larger systems. Just the record keeping or the equipment ordering and all those things. The record analysis is just huge. So, if you're a computer geek and love to build models, the amount of data that those swine operations have to go through is huge, but if you want to be production and you want to do that, the show pig industry would be an opportunity, and it's kind of cool because again, I, started here in '88, and as in most states, it was a purebred industry that were the leaders of the state. They were the classic gentlemen that, they started the pork councils, the National Pork Board and all, they started all those things. And as we moved away from that, as AI became huge and, buying F1 females, the good ones morphed into the feeder pig or in the show pig side, and I look at Chuck and Ben Olson, in South Dakota, premier, and back to their dad, Grandpa Charles, just great people, great producers, but they saw the industry changing, and so Chuck did that at the end, and now his son Ben supports his family on maybe 100, 150 sows and some lambs and that kind of stuff, and doing really well. So there might be some niche things there. There could be things, Nyman Ranch, those kinds of things. I do some work with Validus doing, Prop 12 audits and common swine industry audits. And the Prop 12 audits are pretty interesting because, they have to have 22, 24 square feet per animal. I was in a farm south of Omaha in that area, and it was like how I raised pigs growing up. We got fenced around the cottonwood trees. You got a calf shelter out there, but they made it work. So how do you get away from the high input cost? There's ways you can do it, right, on the swine industry. So your productivity may be a little bit less, right, but you don't have those huge investment costs as well. So if you have even older facilities and get hooked up in a natural system or whatever you want to, I think that might be an opportunity for young people to get going.
What number are you using for a wean to finish building? $450? $400 a pig space?
Oh, so what would that be? It's about 1.1, 1.2 million right now for a wean to finish barn. $500 a pig space.
And it wasn't that long ago we talked about that for being a sow space.
Oh yeah, yep. It used to be 750,000 would build that wean to finish barn. So it's a different world. So again, I think there's opportunities out there that if you want to, you can get into it, right? It goes back to that same thing. If you're smart, if you're hardworking, if you look for opportunities, if you're not blaming the crappy things in your life on somebody else, if you're willing to work a little bit, you are going to be rewarded.
The difference between that $500 per pig space and putting that hot wire on those cottonwood trees is
right.
a magnitude difference in labor.
Yeah, and that's it. What you're doing, you're trading building facilities for the extra labor you do, right? But that doesn't mean
probably some death loss.
Right. You don't have to do it your whole life, right? Again, as most people when they start out, they don't have a lot. And you save, you build, and then once you've got the equity built up, and then you can maybe get a confinement barn if you want to. You don't have to, but I think that's one of the challenges that we see are when a lot of people graduate, they want the corner office, and they don't want to do the work to get to the corner office. Unfortunately, I know when I was in Kansas State at grad school, Gary Stoner had spent some time working for Tyson. And so we got to tour, and actually Gary was a friend of Don Tyson. And one of the things everybody in Tyson does at whatever managerial level, anyway, at that time, you spent 6 months on the line, right? Because Don wanted people to understand, if you're managing these people, what does their lives look like? How would you like to be on a line eviscerating chickens for 8 hours? Anyway, but so I think we have to have people understand that there's work is work, right? There's nothing. I'm doing a terrible job explaining, but there's honor in every type of work you do, right? If you're busting your butt power washing in the barn, that's no different than the guy trading stocks, right? They're both working, but yeah, why I don't know why we say these are bad jobs, but
well, because you're dirty.
Yeah, that's right.
I still remember the first room I power washed.
Yeah.
It was a nursery at PIG west of Woodburn, Indiana, and guess what happened the next day when I came in? You didn't do a good enough job. You need to get back in there.
There you go. That's right. That is right.
Pressure washing and castrating, and then dehorning were the three things I absolutely hate. Dehorning will drop me like you kicked me between the legs. As our industry becomes more global,
mm-hmm.
and then we're fighting the challenges of being successful right now,
right.
Some of those niche opportunities might be really successful opportunities for somebody.
Yeah, I think they are. as you look at different economies, people have more money and they're willing to spend it on food. One of the first things countries do when your standard of living rises, you improve your diet, right? You get more protein, more animal protein, those kinds of things. And you look at countries like Vietnam, right? I mean, food is more than just a nutrient source, right? There's a culture behind it. It's important to them how the animals were raised, right? And all those things. So if we can talk about, here's how they're raised, here's what we feed or what we didn't feed, those kinds of things. But for the export market, though, you've got to be large enough to be able to get into those places.
We started the conversation talking about how pigs don't follow the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that I work with and what I'm helping fix in China is the fine line between perfection and practicality.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen it in our careers. Yep. How are you working with your students, both undergrad and graduate, to be in a position where they can accept that perfection should not trump practicality?
Right. Yep. So Dr. Barry Dunn is our president, and he said, don't let perfection be the enemy of good, right? Mm-hmm. And two times we want to be perfect, then it's a mess. I think one, and even to maybe go off in a little bit, is that we also need to get back on the husbandry part of it too. Again, up to the 1960s, there were departments of animal husbandry. Okay, that's what we did. Then we had the space race. Everybody fell in love with science, and now we're the departments of animal sciences. And that's the husbandry part is one of the lost skills. And I still remember when I first started at Kansas State, Dr. Gary Ali, again, one of the legends, said, watch the pig. It'll tell you everything you need to know. So again, when my manager gives me this checklist and says, here's what you do these things, and I go out and watch the sows or watch the pigs, they're like, man, this isn't right. How come I'm doing it that way? But I think if you're a manager, you have to have a good enough relationship with your employees where you're willing to listen to them. Because they're in the barn 8-10 hours a day. You may not be, but they see some things that you do, but value them. And that's what life comes down to, is value and respect, right? I don't care what job is. If you need to listen to the people doing that job, so you better understand what they're going through, and they probably know. And that's what I try to tell our younger extension people, or even our grad students, is like, look, when you're in extension, you need to understand that most of those producers know more about the stuff than you do. You are not the white knight coming in. Did you work with Dale Keysucker? Uncle Dale, right? There wasn't probably anybody more progressive than Dale Keysucker. And to think, a young PhD graduate going to come in and tell Dale how to raise pigs, we both know how that would turn out. So, but
I think we've both been on the wrong end of that discussion.
But again, that's these guys, our producers today. They're business people, and they get it. They know what they're doing. So actually, those things need to be a give and take where we learn a lot from them, right? And then here's the things that we know that we can share. But again, it goes back to leadership. You need to listen to the people underneath you.
You're just talking about a feedback loop.
Yeah, there you go.
It's that simple. Here's what we did. Here's what I want you to do. You come back and tell me whether it worked or not, then we'll readdress it.
Right.
That's a powerful tool that you can give your employees to allow feedback.
And again, it helps make that crappy day better, right? If I'm power washing for 12 hours or 10 hours and then somebody chews on my butt for something else, it's like there's a better job somewhere else. But, if they sincerely ask and listen and even grab that wand once in a while and help them power wash, that goes a long ways.
Oh, yeah. Well, we keep hitting on power washing.
Yeah.
It is. I think that and working in the stick pit in the plant would be the two worst jobs in the industry.
Right.
I can taste the fly larva hitting my mouth right now.
Yeah.
Oh, as you're approaching, 5 months till retirement?
5 months to go, yeah.
Is there anything you want to get done in the next 5 months?
Oh, there's a lot. You know what? That's a really good question. You know what? What my wife Karen and I are trying to do is figure out what's next. And that's always a big thing, because you got to have a purpose for living, right? Mark Twain said the two most important days are the day you're born and the day you figured out why you're born. And I mean, God put us all here for a reason, and it's not to serve ourselves. I mean, again, you look where we are. We're in the greatest country in the world. We've been blessed more than anybody else, and we need to take those time and talents and help other people's lives be better. And so that's one of the things. We're going to wrap up here at SDSU, and we've got great young people taking over. So my job is just not to screw it up in the next 5 months, right? And help when I can. But so those chapters are closing here at SDSU, but that's what Karen and I need to do, is figure out what's next, because we want to make a difference. And anyway, that's what we're looking at.
As you're thinking about a note or a letter that you write for the next endowed chair to take your spot, do you have 2 or 3 points that you want to get across to them?
Yeah, I mean, again, first, I would say that first thing that I said is the people you work with know more than you do. I mean, they're almost all of them are college educated. They're running multi-million-dollar businesses. Just because they're doing it differently doesn't mean it's wrong. They have a really good reason why they're doing it that way, and you need to learn, right? And the other thing, and again, I graduated from high school in 1978, right? And in a class of 65. And the thing that I remember, just because you got a college degree doesn't mean you're the smartest person in the room or you're the best person in the room. I look at my high school class, and top 2, top 3 kids in my class never went to college. They were really smart in high school. They came. Families didn't have a lot of money. It was a tough deal, and so they couldn't afford to go to college. And so again, humility is really important. Just understanding that we were blessed. Not everybody got the same opportunities that we did. And so, yep, we're here to help. We're here to serve, and always be ready to listen. The other thing that I think is really important, that at least has worked well for me, is go the extra mile kind of thing. We've had a great relationship with the South Dakota Pork Producers Councils. They've done so much for us. But you know what? When Turner County is having a Turner County fair and they need help somebody grilling loins, you get in there and help you grill loins, right? You help whenever you can. If weekends, I don't care. You make that part, because after 38 years, Jim, I mean, they're not stakeholders, they're friends and family. You go to weddings, you go to funerals, and just treat them like you'd want to be treated.
Those are 3 great points, and I summarized your second point is understand that you are not better than someone, just more fortunate.
Yep. Oh, that's a great way of saying it. It is a great way of saying it. And then with that, being fortunate, then after that comes the responsibility.
Yeah. That's a great suggestion. I mean, I think about some of the endowed chairs I worked with, like Dr. Kastner at K-State,
yep.
In the meat science department. Yep. I think he is the poster child for humility.
Oh,
yeah. And I would throw you in that too.
Yep. And he's a heck of a softball player too. So
that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Him and Melvin Hunt.
Oh yeah, exactly. Hunter, Guy Karakoff, all those great gentlemen. Again, we were so fortunate. I mean, we were with legends. You look at all those guys. And Larry Cora, Don Good was department head when I was there. Jack Riley. I mean, they're just incredible human beings that we were so fortunate to be around.
The one that really stands out to me is Don Croft.
Yep.
In the meat science department.
Yep.
Mike, wow. Just walk into his office and it's stacked.
Yeah, right.
And he could tell you exactly where a paper was. Oh, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Some of the personalities we crossed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But you're exactly right. I mean, that's what made those people happy. And I think the other thing, too, and it goes back to a little bit what you said, I mean, that World War II generation, Tom Brokaw had the book, The Greatest Generation. And, not to get political, but those people worked across the aisle. It was we went with the South Dakota Ag and Rural Leadership Program to Vietnam, and we also went to Cambodia to a school that's being fed, a rural school, by the World Food Program, right? But that started by the McGovern-Dole Act. So George McGovern, Democratic Senator from South Dakota, Bob Dole, Republican, both great World War II vets, said, screw it. We've got to help these people. It doesn't matter who gets the credit. And they did a lot of really good things. And, I got to look at Rick Wallstrom. He was my mentor. Nobody I respect more than Rick. He was in the Battle of the Bulge. And those people that saw what happened when things go south and were much better working together. And again, both parties need to look in the mirror, and we need to say, how can we do this better?
Yeah, we need to put a mirror up in front of all of them and say, you guys are wrong.
Exactly.
And you're right.
Oh, exactly. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, think back to when you were at K-State, Tip O'Neill and Reagan and that whole thing. Like, I'll cuss you out on the floor, but doggone it, let's go get a Manhattan together.
The one thing that would have really changed this country is when John McCain was running for president, and he wanted to have Joe Lieberman as his vice president. So, they respected each other that much. So you have a great Republican, Joe Lieberman, a great Democrat, and, he wanted him to be his vice presidential candidate, talked him out of it, got Sarah Palin, and we know where the rest of it went from there. But again, nothing against Sarah. But if we could have had that, what a great model that would have been, Jim. We can, it's more about values, right? What about you value? So if you have two people, even though different parties want the same thing, let's work together and make it happen.
That would have been remarkable.
That would have been so cool.
Heart, instead of the marketing.
Yeah. Yep.
That was pure marketing. We got to get a woman so we can pull a woman.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
What more important than reach across the aisle and pull something?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we didn't
intend to
turn this into old man talks.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, it's been great catching up with you, and it's been having the ability to chat with you without all the other interruptions we typically have was K-State dinner or animal science meetings. And your trajectory and the path that you've taken in 38 years at South Dakota State, taking some of the crazy lessons you got from Molly and Nelson and Plano, was really awesome.
Yeah.
So we end every interview with 5 questions. What is one lesson from ag you carry with you every day?
Growing up, again, growing up in the 70s and 80s, especially the 70s, in South Dakota, it was terribly dry, a lot of droughts. The economy was really tough, and you always learn to take care of animals before you took care of yourself. That responsibility that you had to do that. I think that's one thing I learned, and I carry that with me a lot.
Yeah, that take care of others before you take care of yourself.
Yeah.
You go a long ways.
Yeah. And again, I think those are lessons that you learn raising livestock, right? And, the whole life cycle, right? Yes, you can have pets, right? You can have pet pigs, pet cattle, and all those things, but right, we raise them for one reason, right? We raise them to provide food for human beings, and there's that circle of life. And you see death happen at an early age. Your dog gets run over. You do these, and you understand that a little bit better too, I think.
We understand the circle of life because we got exposed.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. And you didn't have to have 500 mama cows and 1,000 sows.
You did not.
The show pig kid or the show steer kid understands. I walked out and pig had an ulcer and I didn't know it and fell over dead. Oh crap!
Yeah.
So,
and before I'm probably taking too much of your time, but I think that's one of the bright futures of the swine industry is the show pig side. My family, I never showed a pig in my life. Right? My family didn't do that. When it came to SDSU, it's like, But I look at it now, and I look at the young people that come in with a passion for pigs, and it's the kids that are show kids, right? 4-H and FFA and open class, all those things. They have a passion for it. So we have a swine club at SDSU, about 50 students. 2 years ago, a group of them started the Jack's Classic, and it was a pig show in September of 24. They had like 100 and some entries. They had it last September, and they had over 200 entries. And so I'm guessing next year, this September, when we do it, it's going to be well over 300. But again, here's kids who have a passion for pigs. And so even though they may be an ag business major or whatever, I think the show ring is kind of the gateway drug into pork production. We don't have to sell them that pigs are good, that this is good with alive. And if we can get them to understand that, okay, here's some of the opportunities for you in the swine industry, I think that's great. But yeah, hats off to the kids that are in the show ring. Good friend of mine, Robert Rasmussen, one of the hardest working people I've ever known. And, he would talk about when the kids growing up, they went to shows all over the country. And he said, look, we don't have a boat, we don't have a camper, we don't go down the river on the weekends, but we do these things together as a family. And I guess that would be the other thing that I would take growing up about in agriculture. A lot of those families work together all the time. I mean, mom and dad and all the kids. And I was fortunate enough to grow up on the same farm with my grandma and great uncle. And, 50 yards away from our house, struggle sometimes, but, you had that there and you're part of something bigger.
Well, the thing I like about the show pig, if you take a young person that's been taking care of animals, show animals, mm-hmm. they understand what it means when it's all feed. Oh, yeah, I went out and gave it a pound and a half of feed and it was already there. They understand what it means when his eyes aren't bright. They understand when that up-eared pig has a down ear, like, man, he might not feel good. Or a white pig that turns red, he might have a fever. So those are some of the things you can't teach, or you can't teach easily.
Right.
You just have to experience them sometimes.
Yep, that's part of that whole husbandry thing that we, years ago, Jim Ailes was our department head, and he said, we might have to go back to teaching husbandry because kids don't have it.
Well, that's a great point. And when I was at Purdue, they had a class called Animal Science 442.
Okay.
And we farm kids jokingly called it pet a cow.
Yeah. Sure.
And now, talking to the faculty at Purdue, that is probably one of the most powerful classes because there's people that don't have that, can actually pet a cow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And actually can go see what a milking machine, can see what a farrowing room is.
Yeah. Yep, and explain why. So cool. So, 10 years ago when we opened our new swine unit, so we have observation hallway, and it's elevated so you can look down into gestation and you can look down into farrowing, and I'll never forget, there was a grandpa and his probably 12-year-old granddaughter, and we had sows in the farrowing stalls, and she goes, oh, this is horrible, this is terrible. And he said, look, when I grew up, we had them in pens with straw. That seems really good. But the mama sow, laid and crushed 3 or 4 of them every time. That's why we do that. Or in cold weather, right? They've got heat lamps for the meat and all these other things. And the granddaughter got it, right? So all of a sudden, instead of farrowing stalls being horrible and terrible, it's better care for both the young piglet. It's better care for the sow. And we just have to help people tell that story. That was one of the cool things. Again, President Dunn is awesome. He is probably the only land grant president who ranched for 17 years. Barry got his bachelor's. He's from Southwest South Dakota, part Native American. Bachelor's and master's here. Went back to the family ranch, ranched in it, and that's tough country. Did that for 17 years with his brothers, and they wanted to leave, so they ended up having to sell. And he came. But Barry's an incredible guy, and but when we started this swine unit, his goal was to demystify pork production. That was a great phrase because it is, because again, we want people to understand that we do care about these animals. Ask people 2 years ago when they're losing their ass, why are you doing it? You're not doing it to make money, but you're doing it because you care about those animals. And so we have to help the 99.9% of the people that don't get what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why it's the right thing.
So the next question, if you could have coffee with any historical figure in agriculture, who would it be?
Who would that be? What is his name? The father of the Green Revolution and he was
Norman Borlaug.
Yeah, I think he would be a really cool one to visit with. I think he would be really cool. I've seen a lot of really great sayings by him, but again, But again, the whole thing about world stability. I mean, if you look where a lot of the wars have happened, it's because food insecurity. But again, I think Norman Borlaug would be really cool to visit with.
And I think a nuance to that of Norman Borlaug is to not only talk with him about what he did, but also dump him into 2026 and say, look what happened with your suggestion.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about how many billions of bushels of corn in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Unfathomable at his time.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
What is one quirky or underappreciated thing about agriculture more people should understand?
Especially in the United States. And COVID didn't do many good things, but one of the things that it did, at least temporarily, is it made the U.S. citizens understand how fragile the food system is. If we have a hiccup anywhere in there, you're not going to have food on your grocery shelves. It just doesn't magically appear. And understand the hundreds of thousands of people that go out there every day, and sometimes in really crappy conditions, right? I mean, in blizzards or in 110-degree heat, or you're losing your money. Think about the people that, in 2010 had a PED outbreak and everything died, right? Those people still stay with it because they want to help feed the world. And so understanding that, don't criticize farmers with your mouth full kind of thing, right? But understand where your food comes and what it takes, and that why this truly is the safest and least expensive food system in the world. When the rest of the world spends 40% of their income or more on food, and we're at 7%, and that gives us 37% of our income to spend on stupid things like cars, boats. I mean, we take it for granted. I mean, we're a victim of our own success, and they need to get the people with boots on the ground and understand what their life is, what they're sacrificing.
Your suggestion is not an arrogant thank a farmer.
Yeah.
It is
right.
The more you know, the more we're better off.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. What is your favorite ag-related tool, product, or innovation?
I think the one that's amazed me the most in my lifetime has been AI in pigs. Because when I started in '88, and Don Levis, again, he's another giant.
Yeah.
Don got his PhD here at South Dakota State. But anyway, Nebraska, and there's the Levis breeding system. I mean, and pen mating, Don had revolutionized that worldwide, and then in 20 years, it's gone. Because AI has just taken off that much. I mean, if I look at, and again, you talk to our students about it, how come pigs are making so much more genetic improvement than cattle? You go up that genetic pyramid, and since we're able to use AI, we can go much higher up that pyramid, get really superior animals, and AI, in a commercial operation, it's tough to do. And so I think the artificial insemination swine has just amazed me how quickly anybody can do that. That was one of my extension things early on. We were looking for the halothane gene, the stress gene in pigs, right? And so I'd go out and we'd bleed animals. And, we're on a farm. They didn't have a snare, so we used baling twine for a snare. And it's like, what do you mean I'm going to stick a needle in that Hampshire boar's neck when that's all you got? But, I think that's important, so.
Well, just think, you see us, in our part of the world, you see a white car that says Birchwood on the side.
Yeah, exactly.
On the side. And you realize that inside that, the cargo has thousands of boars worth of semen.
Yeah.
If you equated it to live boars that we would take.
Yeah.
It's just remarkable. And it's on such a scale that the normal person can't understand.
No, you can't.
The last question. What is one small change that can make a big impact on agriculture's future?
That's a really good question. What is one small change that we can do? I hate to say that's, telling your story thing, because so many organizations have tried it, and it's, it's not for lack of want of trying, but I think unfortunately, people are always wanting to look at the negative side of stuff. So, I guess if there's one thing that would be, I think you stumped me. That's a Gary Alley on a PhD defense question, right? What is one small thing that we can do? I think one of those things, that we need to do is admit when we make a mistake, admit when we're doing something that's not necessarily right. But not only, okay, we know it's wrong, but what are we going to do to change that? We can never, like I tell our kids when we're doing the CAFO stuff, never tell me a livestock operation doesn't stink, right? We know they stink. So what are we going to do to mitigate that, or how can we manage around it so our neighbors will let us build a CAFO? And it's the same thing with everything that we do. We started off, Jim, talking about sow mortality, right? We need to step up and say, this is wrong, right? We can do better. And so, does that involve genetic selection? There's probably something involved in there, right? We look at everything, right? I think everything plays a part in that, but we just can't say, yep, it's a problem, but that's okay, So I think that's it. Admit we have a problem, but then truly show that you're doing, and again, whatever it is, right? If it's euthanasia, we have to euthanize animals. Is blunt force trauma the right way to do it? Right now, for newborn pigs, that's as good as it gets. We've tried CO2 and other stuff. But anyway, just let people know that you care and that you're willing to make that improvement. And just be honest, because it's too easy to prove when you're lying, and then you've lost all credibility.
Open up the black box.
Oh, yep.
Well, Bob, this has been a great interview. Congratulations on your impending retirement.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to do when you finally walk away from the office there at South Dakota State.
Well, thank you. It's been a great run. Been blessed to work with wonderful people and very patient wife and great kids who put up with us when I was on the road a lot. So.
Well, listeners, this is a great example of dedication to the swine and agricultural industry. PhD at Kansas State, followed with 38 years at South Dakota State, dealing with the East River and West River issues. I think Bob Thaler has left his mark in the swine industry, and he's left some big shoes to fill on that endowed chair at South Dakota State.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that.